sermon title, Dust and Such Matters. I must confess that Lent was always a dreaded season to me until I did a lot of hard work recently and tried to unlearn what I was taught in my theology. Because it's tough being or dealing with the dark side of things, and for some of us, I say some people enjoy that, as I've been learning in the Bible study groups, but going for 7 weeks with fasting and giving up and contemplating your own mortality and such things, that's difficult for me. It's all right to do it for a while, but after you've realized and put in the work, I think there are positive matters to look at. So until recently, when I was able to reorient myself and say, all right, let's try and focus on what I think the season of Lent originally, when it found its place in the life of the early Christian communities, what it was intended for. Originally, and that's at least some scholars thinking that way, it was the time when new people or people that want to join the Christian community, when that was the instruction phase, like confirmation today. They would get adults and they would teach the adults about Christianity, and then on Easter Sunday they would be confirmed and accepted as members of the community. As the church settled into society, the number of adult confirmands decreased, because now you were baptizing children and they grew up in the church. So it was no longer necessary to have this instruction period for adults. So the church had to find something to do with that nice period that was already in existence. And I think history had a part to play in that, where they thought, okay, we're going to lose our grip on our congregations if we do not instill some fear in them and bring some darkness to them as well. So I think Lent should indeed be a time for contemplation, for reorientation, but more so for renewal as we journey towards Easter. Because if you look at the so-called pagan time when Easter is, and that Lent was the approach to, it is a time of spring. And the Old English word and the Old Dutch word Lenten or lengthen refers to the lengthening of the days, which leads to spring and a new season of growth and new life. So I will try to honor that this Lent as we journey towards Easter. And I was thinking as we did our Ash Wednesday service, these words that we listened to again in that beautiful poem, we are dust and we return to dust. I listened to that and I thought that in itself is a sobering thought. It almost made me feel like the formulary that we had to use, the prescribed words that we had to use in the church that I received my training in, that I grew up in, when you had a memorial service or a funeral. Life was described as a slow death. That optimistic look at it. Life is nothing but a slow death. So we are ashes or dust, and we return there. When we look at that beautiful poem, Psalm 90, and also the psalm that Tom also read from Psalm 139, I think the tone for the author is set in the very first verse, where God is described as a refuge or a place of safety. And then in the next few verses that we listen to, God's omniscience, God present everywhere, and God knowing everything, is contrasted with the fleeting moments that we exist on this planet. That it passes like grass that sprouts, and when the sun burns it or the wind goes over it, it just dies off, and it is gone. Man's mortality and the fleetingness of our existence, the very brief period that we consciously inhabit this earth, is contrasted with eternity and with the mystery of God and God's thoughts and God's presence in this world. We continue to experience that when we listen to Psalm 139, where it is described, where God is described as, even though God is eternal and God is far beyond what we can imagine or figure out, that God is present. The actuality of God in the life of the author is stated there. And it reflects, for the biggest part, Hebrew thought, that God, even though a mystery, is not somewhere out there far away from us, but that God is actively involved in the living of every day. I think that is something that we can learn from these ancient authors, this beautiful poetry. To try and hold during Lent these contrasting thoughts of God as a mysterious entity or a force, God as mystery, present everywhere, always, and God lasting to eternity, and that is from eternity, that philosophers have grappled forever to try and formulate some kind of a definition or a description of God, and that's always lacking. With us as human beings, inhabiting this planet, and when you look at geological timescales, indeed, just a whisper or a very fleeting brief moment that seems to be contrasting each other. And it seems to call us to say, well, if we are here for such a very brief time, what is the use of it? On the one hand, say life is useless because we are here so briefly. Nothing that we can do is really worthwhile in the bigger picture. Or it can lead us to say, while we are here so briefly, let us grasp everything that we can from this life and do everything to the fullest and get out of it what we can for ourselves, because that is all that we can do. That is indeed the conclusion that the author of the book of Ecclesiastes comes to. We are dust. That is indeed true. And when I heard the verses again at the Ash Wednesday service, what came to my mind, and I dwelled on that through the service and during the rest of the week, that phrase that we are stardust. And I started reading about this thing, this stardust. Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, the lyrics, Woodstock. We are stardust, we are golden, we are billion-year-old carbon, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. I agree especially with the garden part, but there's still too much snow on the ground for that at the moment. but we are stardust. If you read the findings of the astrophysicists combined with biology, it is indeed true that our bodies are made up of elements, molecules, atoms, particles, some of them which originated with a Big Bang, some of them, or most of it at least, present when stars were dying, and stars that are dying now. And I never knew it, but I read recently in reading about this stardust thing that we are renewing our bodies constantly. We are replacing, literally recycling this stardust that has been here forever, since the origin of the universe billions of years ago. Not only carbon, but especially heavy elements like gold and uranium, etc., etc. Carbon as well. But we are recycling those elements, the stardust. Depending on what kind of cell in our bodies, we are replacing those. Where there is contact with the outside, with the atmosphere, like our skin and our lungs and our intestines, those cells are replaced very frequently. They have a very short lifespan. And then our heart cells, it seems that after 50 years we have replaced those. But I don't want to say that's the truth. Maybe John Szymanski will know better if that is indeed the case. To me, that is wonderful, that we are stardust, that we have that integral connection with the universe that we are embedded in. And it's not only a concept that we can construct to say what we do and who we are have meaning for eternity, and what we do and who we are indeed have meaning for this life as well. No, it's not only a concept or a philosophical construct, but it is indeed the reality that we are, through the stardust and through our origin and what we recycle and what we have and what we carry in ourselves, we are connected and embedded in this universe and part of each other as well. To me, that is profound. It is also, it feels contradictory. And perhaps that is what we, in this Lenten season, as it was a period of teaching and a season of teaching in the early Christian church, that we can try and teach ourselves as well. As people who love security, people who want things planned and settled, people who do not like uncertainty, especially when it pertains to the future. Perhaps we can teach ourselves that as God's people. That as that author in Psalm 90 said, God is a refuge or a safe harbor. Maybe we can teach ourselves that, to hold these seemingly contradictory thoughts and contrasting thoughts together and learn to live with that discomfort, that uncertainty, those contradictions, and journey as God's people, open to learning new things, open to being renewed in God's Spirit. We are stardust. We are God's people. Life is meaningful. Let us live into and in that certainty. Amen.